significant because that's exactly 100 years ago from where we're at right now. World War I, 1914, 1915, in through 1918, and at the time it was called the Great War. And it's really, really important, as I've told the kids over and over again, really, really critical, that you must understand and remember your history, or you are destined or doomed to repeat it. And so much of what happened 100 years ago, you're seeing playing out today on the world stage. Just to give you a brief synopsis, because World War I is always that sort of forgotten war, you know, the Civil War, and then basically 50 years after the Civil War comes World War I. 20 years later after that comes World War II. World War II completely happens because of World War I, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. With World War I, you had a bunch of teenagers, Serbian nationalists, that were upset that this huge empire, Austria-Hungary, was taking over that entire part of the world. Austria-Hungary was a huge empire at the time, and they ruled many different nations and ethnic groups of people. These Serbian teenagers didn't like it, and so they shot Archduke Ferdinand and his wife in a parade back in 1914. Okay? And what you need to understand is, back then, two things were very, very different, pretty much, than they are today. One, you still had the aristocracy very much in control. Every nation, for the most part, had a king. Okay, the United States was very much different, and most of them were also related. And the King of England looked almost identical to his cousin, the King of Russia. All right, they're almost all related, and there's all these kings and queens and dukes, so there's a lot of egos at play here. Also, a lot of them have made alliances. Serbia has an alliance with France. France has an alliance with England. England has an alliance with America, with Russia. On and on and on and on it goes. The Austrians have an alliance with Germany. Long story short, they all get involved in the war. And what makes World War I so devastating is that they're still using old-style military tactics. Think Civil War, okay? Think Pickett's Charge, right? These kids went down to Gettysburg last year. Maybe some of you have been down there too. A battle like Pickett's Charge down at Gettysburg is a great example for the Civil War. In Pickett's Charge, the Southern troops line up about a mile away and run across an open field towards the Northern troops. The Northern troops basically mow them down with cannon and rifle. Okay? Same thing is happening now in World War I, except now in World War I, technology has caught up. They're all down in trenches. A man with a whistle blows a whistle. They go over the top. They go over the top of the trench, and they run through what they call no man's land. It's an area between the enemy and who you are, and it's covered in barbed wire, and there's all these mines and whatnot, except you're facing machine guns, you're facing tanks, which are brand new from this point. You have airplanes, which were only invented 11 years before, dropping bombs on people. And the worst part, poisonous gas. It was a horrific war. And sadly, so many of the commanders, their idea was, we'll drain the enemy's supplies of bullets by absorbing those bullets with men. If we send enough men over the top, they'll take the bullets, the other side will run out of ammunition. And that's sort of the way they thought about human life. Again, it was kings and queens, and they thought, we'll let those people do it. It wouldn't be their children. Okay? That changed the world dramatically. By 1917, Russia has a huge revolution. They bring in Vladimir Lenin. We have communism. To this day, the Chinese and the North Koreans are communists because of 1917. Again, if we don't learn from our history, we repeat it. We'll get more into that later, but to recruit people for such a terrible war, the songs were surprisingly upbeat. In order to get them to come over and fight, especially with the Americans, the idea that appealed to the Americans was, hey, American boys out there working on a field in Oklahoma, you've never been more than 15 miles away from your home. Guess what? If you can board a train, you can come to France. And there's some pretty girls in France. There's some neat sights to see over in Europe. Come on over. One of these songs that is really, really catchy is the next song that we're going to do. It's a long, long way to Tipperary. No way I caught that attention.
It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there.
A barbershop arrangement, you know, where you see the guys, they've got the armbands around and the straw hats. Barbershop is really, really, really difficult. It's kind of making a comeback. If any of you watch Jimmy Fallon late at nights, he's been doing a lot of rap and hip-hop songs in barbershop. But anyway, so the kids did a great job of that, because that is really, really, really difficult. Now, the conclusion of the war. And this is the part that maybe you knew, maybe you didn't know, but this completely sets up World War II. For years, the Allies and the Central Powers That's what they called them back then. They weren't the Axis, they were the Central Powers. So the Allies, us, England, France, Russia for a while, we were fighting against the Central Powers, and they would fight for instance, a year over the same few yards of land, and after a year of fighting, and literally millions of men dead, they had moved no more than a few yards. Unbelievable when you study World War I. It is by far the most sad and depressing war to study. It's just unbelievable. And they would do it over and over every few months. They would plan another offensive, and they would spend time, and they would get all the ammunition ready, and they would bomb the other side, and then they would over the top, and they would push back the other side. But then the other side would repel them and bring them back. And after a year and a half, after 2 years, almost in the exact place is where they started. Finally, the United States gets involved in about 1917. And because there's a new country coming in with all of our ability to mechanize an army and all these new fresh troops, essentially the Germans just couldn't keep going. Okay? It was either going to be the British and the French that gave up, or the Germans. And when we got involved on the side of the French and the British, the Germans basically had to surrender. There was no direct surrender to the war. It was an agreement to cease fighting. Okay? So technically there wasn't a winner or a loser. However, when they came together to negotiate peace terms, the British, especially the French, really wanted to nail the Germans. They wanted to make them pay for this war, because the Germans, to some degree, really were the aggressors at the beginning with the Austrians. And so they made all these horrible demands on Germany. Good to some degree. They didn't want Germany to have standing military. They didn't want a certain amount of weapons, what have you. But it so impacted the German people financially. I mean, the country of Germany was bombed out in many respects. They couldn't recover, so their people were starving. The people became angry. And so it didn't take too long for a man like Adolf Hitler to show up in the early 1930s and say, hey, we shouldn't take this from the other countries. We don't need to pay them back. We can do our own thing. And right when Hitler shows up, the Depression's hitting the rest of the world. So America's no longer paying attention because we're going through the Great Depression. Hitler raises up an army, and many people know the rest of World War II. And that's how it happened, sadly. And the biggest part was, even after our president at the time, Woodrow Wilson, in World War I, ratifies this whole treaty that, okay, there's going to be no more war, peace in our time, that's it. The Great Wars, the war to end all wars, that will never happen again. There were people in Congress back here that were putting out op-eds, if you will, to the local newspapers saying, hey, there's going to be another war coming, it's only a matter of time because of the way that we handle this. So sadly, it's a good lesson to learn moving forward in the future that has ever been written. Written by the great composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He actually died while composing it. The song is extremely challenging. It's written in Latin. It's absolutely beautiful. It's also one of the pieces that we're going to sing down Hershey for the judges. So please enjoy La Promosa.
So
for that. Part of the thing that's really neat, well, actually there's a few things that were neat about that. First off, 2 of the kids just came in to actually take the place of other kids that couldn't sing solos. So 2 of the people that were singing in that didn't even know they were singing it, but one girl found out just a few hours before the concert. So sort of when her name was in the program, oh, guess what, I guess I have to fill in. And it's neat having a group that's this talented that you can just pick kids and say, okay, we need someone to sing this. It's a solo, they come up, they do it. The other thing that was really, really neat with that is that they're all singing different parts. Sadly, one of the boys that was going to do this was going to sing the whole entire thing in falsetto, and he couldn't be here tonight, but he was going to sing the whole thing up there with the girls in his falsetto range, which was really, really neat. I wish you could have heard it. But it's cool to have so many kids that are so talented, and this group really is. I hope that with the music that you've heard this evening, that that's really come across. I really expect the group to do very, very well down in Hershey, and I'm very proud of what they've already accomplished. Incidentally, it's still, you can still get pirate tickets. If you call the Pirates office, ask to speak to Angela Sandier, tell her that you're with Elizabeth Ford. We're singing on June the 3rd. Pirates game is on a Friday night, June the 3rd at 7:05 against the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, of California, of whatever their name keeps growing. But that's the game. So if you want to come see these guys do the national anthem, what we did earlier to start the concert, that's the same version of that we'll be doing. We will conclude tonight's concert with a beautiful arrangement of America the Beautiful. This is one of the prettiest patriotic songs you've ever heard. If you ever watched during the 4th of July celebrations on television, if you've watched the TV show Capitol 4th, the big 4th of July celebration down in Washington, D.C., you'll recognize this same exact version. This is by a gentleman named Carmen Dragon, real name. Incidentally, the father of Captain from Captain and Tennille. Pointless trivia here. But anyway, beautiful arrangement, and we have our 2 wonderful soloists, Tiffany and Alicia, to sing America the Beautiful. thank you parents so much for coming out and supporting us. For many of you, this will be your last concert with us after all the spring and Christmas concerts since they were in 6th grade. Thank you. Thank you so much for having your children participate in Elizabeth Ford's music program and for encouraging them to stay in choir. Please encourage them to stay in choir in high school too, because it only gets better from there. I'll be around if you have any questions about Hershey, but the kids are yours. Thank you. Thank you again for attending.